Hi, everyone. It's Candace Craw-Goldman from quantumhealers.com. And today I want to talk to you about 7 signs of spontaneous past life memories. Now, this all was sparked by an interchange I had with a friend of mine while working out. She was telling me about going to a concert where the music that was played was far before her time. You would even say before she was even born. She went to listen to this certain kind of music. And when some particular song came on, she said something came over her. And she was telling me about this. And she was saying that the emotions she felt were so deep and they were so profound. And she just burst out in tears. She didn't even really know what the emotions were or why she was so profoundly affected. This song wasn't anything particularly different from any other song that was being played in this venue. And it wasn't the melody really, and it wasn't the words at all that seemed, it just seemed the song itself. It seemed to represent something, and she couldn't put it together. And I said to her, well, maybe, you were having a spontaneous past life memory. And she said, what? And I talked to her a little bit about what that might be, how the body sometimes can react to something like that that has come from a memory from a completely different life. And she said, huh. And I said, well, that's, kind of what I do when I take people into the exploration of their consciousness. We can explore those kinds of things and figure out where they came from. Now, I was quick to say, and I really mean this, you do not need a past life regressionist to help you with that. You don't need to be hypnotized to help you with that. It's not required. Is it helpful? Oh, of course, and absolutely. But you can just take yourself, and I told her this, you can take yourself somewhere quiet, maybe before sleeping, before meditation, while you're sitting in a bathtub, while you're driving, any of those kinds of things, and kind of replay the song or replay the song in your mind and see if you can attach your imagination to it, allow your imagination to take that song, see what comes up, see if a story comes up. And, her response was very common and very typical, but we talked about it. And her response was, well, but then I would just be afraid that I made it up. And I laughed because, of course, in this work, that's just a given. And it is so common for the conscious mind to think that. And really, I could personally, because this kind of stuff comes easy to me, I could make up possibly a variety of storylines that would match an event that I was looking into like that. So is it valid? Which one might have been real? If any or all of them could help me understand myself or live my life better, I'm not sure that it really matters. I think the point is to explore it, right? And sometimes these things are profound and they can be traced to past lives that are lived. Other times maybe not, but why not give it a try? And so it occurred to me that there are a lot of different ways that this could work. And I made a little list. So I'm going to refer to this list and talk to you about 7 ways that a spontaneous past life memory could surface in your life. So that was number 1. It could come with a song. And so this show is dedicated to you, my friend. Maybe I'll share the link with you. And here's some other ways. So number 2, I put smells and tastes. Now, the one thing I want you to think about right now, if you are of a certain age or certainly an adult, the way that you can assure yourself that a smell or a taste can take you back somewhere is just think about it in your own life. And some of the more profound and the strong memories that people can associate with the time period are things like school, going to school for the first time, going to kindergarten for the first time. So certain, smells like Play-Doh, right? Graham crackers and milk in my own history, that can take me straight back to being a kid, opening a box of crayons, that smell, that waxy smell, although I have to say they've changed the formulation of crayons since I was a kid. they used to be a much higher quality product, let's say. The stuff that comes out today is far more plastic. The stuff that we had as kids, it had a lot more scent, had a lot more substance, had a lot more pigment and color. They just work better. But anyway, that's a tangent. So it shows you right there within your own current life, a smell or a taste can take you back. Some tastes, like, grandma's cinnamon rolls, my own grandma who made amazing cinnamon rolls, the smell of fried eggs and bacon in the morning, all kinds of things can take you back to certain times in your own life. So you realize that there's a mechanism for that, right? But smell or tastes can take you back to some other lives. And I have a story that goes with that. And so I did an Akashic Records reading a number of years ago with a client who is experiencing some real trouble with weight gain. He was overweight. His family was overweight. He had kind of almost an unnatural desire for bread, baked bread, fresh baked bread, the smell of yeast, crusty baked bread. And I don't know, it sounds pretty good to me, even though I'm gluten-free. Crusty yeast bread is still something I like myself, but this guy was obsessed about it, absolutely obsessed about this smell. Now, it wasn't the reason and everything that he talked about in his session. He had a lot of other things going on in his session, all kinds of things in his life, relationships and emotional attraction with people and problems in relationships and things like that. But he was overweight. He did have a problem. And he did mention, just offhandedly, by the way, this idea of bread. But we did an Akashic Records reading, and this is one of the most powerful ones I've ever done. I was transformed as I was psychically entering his Akashic Records and allowing the information to come forth about what was the most important thing for him to learn that day. An overarching story of what affected all of these areas in his life that were of concern to him right then. The bread part is what I'm going to talk about, but it was just one of the small details that he mentioned in the course of talking about his weight issues. Okay, so I want to make that point clear. But then when I went in to explore his Akashic Records, it was astonishing where I went. And where I went is I saw this man, and he was a man in early, I don't know, probably maybe 16th century, maybe 17th century. It seemed like it was France. And this man was a baker. He had a bake shop in France somewhere, Cobblestone Street, a little tiny shop. And the scene I saw was brief, but it was profound with meaning. And here's what happened in this scene. He was there before dawn. He went into his bakery. He turned on the lights. The lights were warm and incandescent or lamplight. Anyway, the very warm light. And he was starting his bread making and got his ovens going, and the place was warm. And then the bread was rising, and then the bread was cooking. And this man did not have a family in this life. And he was a very large man. He was very tall. He was very rotund. And he was blissfully happy. He was so happy. There were a lot of people around him who were hungry, actually. And for whatever reason, this man was, his life allowed him to run a successful business, earn a living from baking bread, but also he took it upon himself to take bread and give bread to the less fortunate, to the hungry on the streets, in conjunction with the more well-off patrons coming in to purchase his bread. And everybody loved him. They loved him. Profound love for, even though he didn't have a romantic love, he didn't have a wife, he didn't have children, he was profoundly loved, and he was profoundly happy. So can you see how visiting that life, going into his Akashic Records and seeing and pulling up this life that was so profound to him in this life when he was huge, this really huge man in a time where not many people were like that, when he was really big, was the most happy that his Akashic records put forth as information. So this desire for fulfillment and being happy, his body, it's recreating that. And in this life, it's expressing in kind of an overweight issue that can bring health concerns. Just very interesting. That Akashic Records reading has stayed with me for a very long time. So smell and taste, right? That was number 2. Okay, number 3, people. So meeting somebody or knowing somebody, an interchange with somebody, especially when you first meet them, but in other ways as well, can give you an insight into a past life. And I'll give you in 2 different ways. First of all, we kind of know this as love at first sight or hate at first sight, right? And in my own life, I'm going to try to be very brief, but in my own life, laying eyes on my husband when I was, I don't even know, was I 14? I wasn't even 14. I think I was 13 going on 14. I laid eyes on him and I lost it, absolutely lost it. My whole life changed. My mother thought I was nuts. And this all happened in 1975. Yeah, so 1975, and it was early in 75. So I was not even 14. I was coming up on 14. And I spent some time with this guy who I'm married to now for 40 years. At the time, he had a little interest in me, not so much. Long story short, we got back together again after almost a decade. But I professed my incredible and profound love for this young man who was just 14, a year older than me. And I remember my mother thinking I was nuts and told me there was no way I could be in love. And I remember being upset at one point and said, I'm going to marry him. And she thought I was absolutely crazy. And of course, that's the way it turned out. That didn't happen until I was 23, and life happened in between, and it was really great. But I remember even telling myself as I became an older teenager and a woman in her young 20s, definitely dating other people, and quite seriously. I remember thinking back to that time when I first met my husband, Tom, and thinking, well, it was only that intense because it was kind of the first, during puberty, and it was really intense because it was the first until I saw him again at barely age 23. And it was the same thing all over again, hit me like a truck. And subsequent exploration has proven that we have spent past lives together. Okay, so here's another one, hate at first sight, and that's a little extreme. But this information came from a BQH client a number of years ago, and she came to have a session, profoundly interesting session. It was an in-person session. She came in and she said, I have this problem with my husband's assistant. Her husband had an assistant who was a woman who was great at her job, who never did or said anything inappropriate. And this woman didn't understand her feelings. She said, I have absolutely inexcusable and ridiculous negative feelings towards this person for absolutely no reason. I don't know why. I just don't know why I don't like her. And so it was the number one reason she came for a session. And so she came for a session. And in this session, we go to a past life where she is interacting with this woman. And in this past life, actually, the client had the role of a bad guy. She was the bad player in this relationship with this other person, and ends up killing her, actually murdering her in this other life. And the higher self explained it all, and she could see it from another perspective. In the past life, it wasn't that this person in this other life had done anything to her. It was that the character she was, I think it was a man at the time, killed this other person out of spite or anger or envy or jealousy for absolutely no reason. It was a petty reason, but held a grudge for a really, really long time. I mean, a profound grudge. And so what the higher self said was this was just remnants of this relationship that they had had in a previous past life. that there was absolutely no reason for it. And if there was a bad guy or a villain in a story, it actually was her past life. And after the whole session was over, every bit of animosity she had towards that woman, her husband's assistant, just vaporized. It just went away. She never even had to think about it again. It was this huge problem in her life. And she came and had, an afternoon session of BQH, and poof, it's gone. Really an amazing session. Okay, so we're on to number 3. Another way that a spontaneous past life memory can kind of show up, where past life images flood in, replacing what is actually there. And I've got a personal story with that. I'll try to be brief again. But I used to go to this place. I mentioned it before in some videos, but I used to go to this place with my horse when I was a teenager, a place I could go right now that is covered with McMansions. A place nearby called Equestrian Estates. Well, why is it called that? Well, there was a lot of people with horses around, and I was one of those back in the 70s. But in this place on the prairie, way back when, it was on the edges of a skeet gun club land. And sometimes I used to be able to go back in there, and I would find a place on this land where, and even back then it was hard to do, but I found a place that I could go where I could turn a perfect circle in my view and not see anything man-made. So not see a fence, a building, a road, a power line even. I didn't see any of those things. I could go to a place there and I could look around and think, this is what it looked like hundreds, thousands maybe, even of years ago. It was just grassland. There was nothing there, nothing to show human touching at all. And I would sit there sometimes with my horse in this one particular place, and I'd look around. And I had done that this one day, and the wind was blowing across my face, and I absolutely was transported. Everything in front of me sort of disappeared, and what appeared in front of me was a complete different landscape. And it had, a different landscape in this way. It was the same land, but it was a Native American settlement. I found myself, even though I was sitting on my horse when the whole thing happened, I found myself standing on the ground next to a horse and had a complete download of a memory of a past life. And that has stayed with me my entire life. It informs my life today. I used to think, this happened probably when I was 15. I used to think that I just had a great imagination. I really thought, wow, look at that. I had this wonderful, powerful imagination moment. And I don't believe that at all now. It's been proven to me time and again. That was a past life. It fits in with a lot of themes of, things I work on in my own personal life. And it is a profound determinant of my personality and my lifestyle right now. I got horses right now. I cannot imagine living without horses. And that was number 4. Okay. Number 5, travel. So this is another reason people travel, I think, maybe. And even if they aren't quite aware of it, some people who are travel bugs, I think they go to get in touch with some of their past lives. So you can go to some places and have really intense experiences in some places, emotional experiences, both positive and negative, that you might not otherwise have or have expected. And some people do things like they may plan for an incredible vacation in an exotic place where it's supposed to be very restful and wonderful, and they show up there and their skin crawls and they can't wait to leave and they don't understand why. Sometimes that's a clue, and it can be the opposite too. You could be traveling and just hit a scene or be somewhere and have profound, fabulous memories of, importance or realization or other things just sort of wash over you when you come across a scene or even just a place on the planet. It could be a place in the woods. It could be a place on a street. Yeah, you just never know. So travel can do it for you. Okay, we are to number 6, museum visits. Now, there's a lot of people who love to go to museums. I'm actually one of them. And for me, I know that this is why. Not only do I get to imagine other people's lives, but I kind of look for my own lives as well. And a story I have of my own daughter, Lauren, she went to, when she graduated high school, she went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington and DC. And the story she tells about stepping into a couple of the exhibits there, including the rail car. Well, let's just say it was almost undeniable, her ancestral and probably past life connection with that scene and with that experience she had now. While her friends were all just sort of talking, she was transported and changed after that. Another way you can have a spontaneous past life memory in a museum. So now we're down to number 7. Antique stores and art exhibits is what I put down for number 7. So antique stores, we have an antique store, a couple of them pretty close by here, actually. And sometimes I will go, if I have a few minutes, it's like my own entertainment. I go into some of these antique stores, really not because I need anything. If I ever buy anything, it's always usually the same thing. It's like small tables. We have a small house, and having small tables tucked around is very important, very useful around here. My computer's sitting on one right now, but I don't buy things a lot of the times, but I go there for the sheer entertainment value in my head, because sometimes I see things from my own childhood and I can step back into those memories. Sometimes I can pick up an object. You can practice your psychometry skills there, but sometimes I can pick up other things and have past life memories flood in. And one time that I know this happened to me was I was in an antique store in New Jersey a number of years ago. My children were, well, Dylan wasn't even born, I think, when this happened. So, back in 1990, when my daughter was just a baby, and I was in an antique store, and I got a tiny cast iron pan. And when I picked up that cast iron pan, this whole past life flooded into my hand, this whole story of, and I don't know whether it's mine or not. I haven't directly explored that, but I took that pan home. I still cook with that pan. It's still my favorite pan. I had breakfast in it this morning. Eggs and some leftover roasted potatoes was my breakfast in that pan this morning. And it gives me joy to use to this day. And every time I pick it up, I am brought to a very simple, but a very warm and loving life in a very small and cozy place. It was actually dark. It was winter, but I was warm, and I was loved, and I was fed. That's really, really important. And that little pan keeps that story and that sense alive in my own kitchen today. So there you have it. 7 ways a past life memory, a spontaneous past life memory, can come into your life. These are not the only ways, but there's some fun ones. You have a spontaneous past life memory pop up in your life? I'd sure like to hear about it. Write about it below, if you would, in the comments. Thanks for listening. And look, if you're looking for a BQH, QHHT, or any other kind of alternative or quantum healing practitioner, please come to quantumhealers.com and look through our listings. And if you are an energy healer or an alternative healer, we'd love to have you join our open-minded and dogma-free community. Again, quantumhealers.com. Thanks for spending time with me today. Bye. See you next time.